the notes and agenda is here. Just pasted that in. We're going to start out with Enrico.
Hi.
Did you make the announcement that the meeting's being recorded now?
The meeting is recorded now. As David always reminds us to do.
Cool. Yeah, Enrico, thanks for joining, and you can go ahead, kick it off, teach us everything that you're doing on Debian.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I've shortly met Kim earlier, some days ago online, and I don't know who everybody else is. Nice to meet you all. Good that you can hear me. Debian, identity management in Debian, kind of. Historically, and we are talking about since more than 25 years ago, joining Debian meant being required to be connected to the Debian Web of Trust somehow with GPG. Are you familiar with GPG Web of Trust? Can I assume that you are? Okay, I can't hear anybody speaking at the moment, but I see people nodding.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you can assume we all know what GPG, the Web of Trust is, and what Debian is also.
Good. That's helpful. Good. Introducing myself, I'm Enrico Zini, one of the Debian account managers, one of the people responsible for membership status in Debian. We've been traditionally requiring Web of Trust because the general idea was, what if somebody does something malicious in Debian? We need to know who they are. We need to be able to go after them, kind of. We are also giving people, like with Debian membership, we give people upload rights. We give people access to machines on the internet. So somehow there's an idea of having people accountable for that access. But the GPG Web of Trust really only gives you a name that somebody checked against some papers somehow, but it's all very random. People have different signing policies. There may be people that sign whatever. There may be people that are super strict about signing. The key signing parties are dubious things. You can probably get pretty much anything signed at the key signing party. Some people tried with explicitly fake documents, for example, and they got signatures. People got signed with the Evo 32 keys. Some of them got signed at key signing parties, so that there's only so much you can trust those. Requiring in-person meeting. Debian developers are probably better than average on key signing, but requiring people to meet in person has been a barrier of entry for people who live somehow in remote areas. People have been taking trains and stuff to go get signatures, but now we can't even ask that anymore because of COVID-19. And so it was time to update all of this. Also, you have a name on somebody, GPG UID, somebody does something criminal, what do you do with it? It turns out not much. It's more likely you can do something with IP logs or something like that. We actually have a case of somebody doing something criminal against Debian. We know name, we know company address, we know a lot of stuff, and then we still have trouble because internationally taking legal action gets complicated. And so it's the GPG identity isn't really helping much, even in real cases. Then there's a question of anonymous vs real identity. We do have people with cross signatures who have obvious nicknames, whose identity would like to be anonymous. They can get cross-signed because one can get signed based on reputation rather than legal documents. If I know that Neo95 shows up at conferences all the time, and I work with them, and I call them by that name, people call them by that name over years, I can just sign their key. I know it's them. I don't need to see their papers. So there's some of that. We do ask people who have anonymous identities to send some statement that we keep very private about who they really are, because of this tradition to want to know real names. And so we do have statements saying, yeah, my actual name is this, and the reason I have the other one is this. But that is also, besides the earlier point, what do you do with the name really? The people that we have in that list are the people who have nickname really like Neo95 or something, and making that one up, but like one word names. But if I decided to show up as Jonathan Smith as a nickname, nobody would bother asking me to provide a statement. And I can get it cross-signed because at the local Linux user group, everybody knows me as Jonathan Smith, and there you go. So that is also dubious. And yeah, also, some people would like to remain anonymous. Some people would like their contribution to be tied to their real identity. It's up to personal matter, but I think in both cases there is some reputation building going on. Like whether I do my work as Enrico Vini or as Neo95, I would like that name to be well recognized in some kind of community, because with work, some kind of trust is built, some kind of reputation is built. So yeah, in the end, possibly more than identity, reputation is kind of the big deal. In Debian, however, we do require that a natural person may have only one identity. Two reasons come to mind. One, we have votes. So the idea is that to have like one person, one vote kind of situation. And we would like that if somebody does something malicious, that will burn one reputation. And there's people concerned about the possibility of having throwaway reputations. Whereas I can, keep doing my thing, and I can do my malicious thing on the side with something where I invested much less in reputation building, and then that get caught and that gets thrown away, and I'm still in the game. So one person having only one identity, how does one enforce it? Okay, with Web of Trust, ideally, somebody has checked papers, but papers can be whatever. We also have the opposite. There's one developer whose legal name is Wookie, just Wookie. I've seen the passport, that's their name. And they get regularly challenged, like, why are you anonymous here? Or something like that. People don't trust because the name is Wookie rather than Jonathan Smith. And that is kind of exposing how fragile this whole name thing is. Okay, so we are switching away from Web of Trust. I'll go back to the natural person having only one identity later. We are switching from meeting people and sign their keys to making signed statements saying, I have worked with this person and they use this key in their work. I have seen it used. So in a way, people in the community can witness that they have seen the connection between the person that has that reputation, that has that knowledge, that has that experience, and that key. And that is kind of a substitute for a signature. So that means Neo95 can get in unchallenged as long as they work with their GPG key and do work together with people. So how do you enforce people having only one identity? Over time. So if somebody has two identities, at some point they show up at some conference, they show up at some online chat or something. It's really hard to keep up multiple personalities over a long time, putting in work. So that is one thing. If at some point something gets exposed, we can revoke membership, and if the person is engaged, it will show up. If the person isn't engaged, we will never know that it was two people. But on the other hand, if a person is not active in the community, the membership should be revoked anyway. There's a gray area in between of less active people. So that's a bit of an it's of something that's hard to do correctly. On the other hand, the cost for a person to appear multiple times is higher for them than it is for us. I saw that. I'll answer it later. So it's more expensive for another person than it is for us. Like a person doing work for two is expensive for them. The worst that can happen for us is that somebody votes twice. We are a large community. It's kind of a disproportionate investment to keep up multiple personas to change the Debian direction through voting. Have I seen the opposite? More than one person behind one identity? That's normal. In Debian, people sponsor. So there can be like one person being the reference Debian developer for a whole local community doing the upload for all the others, for example. And sometimes this is explicit, like you can say, I signed the upload of this other person. Sometimes it could be that you may have someone working at the company doing the upload for everyone else in the company. And yeah, but that kind of ordinary in a way. So yeah, the endorsement is eyewitness key usage. We have some kind of funny two-factor authentication there in the sense that the endorsements are GPG signed when people put them in the website. So it's not just click a button, but it's still connected to the GPG key, which is what we use basically for identity in Debian at the moment. We need to take care about reply attacks a bit, because it turns out nobody looks at the output of GPG when it says how old is a signature. And key endorsements are supposed to expire over time or rot over time. Like if I'm evaluating an endorsement saying I've seen that person using that key 4 years ago, I would like to ask for a more recent one. And so, yeah, at some point, there's going to be some serious kicking into GPG's APIs and output parsing, which is a nightmare, to make signature dates explicit in web interfaces and so on. Yeah, reply attacks are an underestimated vector, like failure point of GPG. So yeah, issues with all this, people may still slip in, like multiple times, for example, but we raise the cost. At the moment, we ask for either key signatures or key endorsements. So both are valid. So we are actually doubling the attack surface. But we are in a hurry to give people a way not to meet because of COVID. It could be just a transition period, and we see how it goes with the endorsements. Somehow, if you sign somebody's key, you might as well endorse them. So in the end, it could be that the transition to endorsements is a bit like not much difference from key signature from a social standpoint, and we're also asking them to be a bit more recent than and better quality than I've met a person at some key signing party I don't remember anymore 6 years ago, which is what key signature actually may mean. And then if you really want to attack Debian, creating one throwaway identity and getting Debian developer status is probably too expensive. It's too much. It's not good value for energy. In a big community, it's very likely cheaper to social engineer your passes into Debian through some existing developer. There are inactive developers that are really hard to detect fairly, and those are all enlarging an attack surface. Somebody is being inactive for 2 years, then we start pinging them, and it takes like 6 months to make sure that they really are not getting mail anymore, or maybe they reply saying, yeah, I had family issues, I'll be back in a year, keep the account open. And then suddenly you have this inactive account, dormant, with permissions attached to them. No idea, a person not active in Debian, what's doing with their own credentials, if they still remember where they have their private keys and passwords and stuff. So until we solve that, I don't think it's worth bothering about people creating throwaway identities to join Debian. That's more or less the notes that I took. In terms of identity, I was mentioning, Kim, it's kind of a tangential. We are seeing a different kind of attack, which is related to identities. There is a person who is explicitly out to hurt Debian, and they are currently doing it by online aggression, cyber stalking, cyberbullying towards Debian developers, and especially Debian developers from more marginalized communities that are more vulnerable to attacks on their reputation. That is not a technical thing in a sense. You don't stop people from harassing with technical means. You stop people from harassing with like cease and desist, or the legal thing saying leave this person alone or else, kind of. But they're really hard to pull together on an international thing, and with the legal experience that we have in Debian, or which, like many other free software projects, there's not like a company with a legal team and a PR team. So it's interesting because it's normal in a free software project to expect the reputation of a person to be on the line. People working on a free software project often do it in order to build their reputation, or at least it's part of the motivation. But then when somebody decides to hit on that reputation with slander, it would be really good as the project that asked for that reputation to be on the line to be able to say, we have your back and we are trying to get organized in that sense, but it's a bit not our field of expertise. So it's slow going, but yeah, but necessary going. I think this is a novel stuff in Debian, but it could be something that's going to come up again in other communities as soon as they rub the wrong way with the wrong corner of the internet. Like currently, it's only one person harassing Debian and several other communities, and at some point, that person will stop because, yeah. But the attack vector is interesting in itself. So anyway, but that's probably something for different thing. So I think I can take more questions if you have them. Did I satisfy your curiosities?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a question, I guess. A lot of what you mentioned is kind of building things up around GPG and fixing the web of trust and building up almost like a new web of trust and dealing with all the problems in GPG. Have you considered switching from something, from GPG to something else?
We have too much infrastructure built on GPG.
Sure.
Signed uploads, signed emails, signed votes, everything is around GPG. Pretty much any other crypto standard is better, including X509 as far as I'm concerned, because there's at least there's better libraries. But even if we wanted to switch to something else, I think it would be that there's way too much legacy to deal with.
Completely fair. Thanks.
I had a question that I think I think it, like, the concept of web of trust was very interchangeably used with GPG. But for example, if I were to say I am able to provide a centralized PKI using GPG packets, would this be something that you think would solve some of the challenges while still be compatible with the infrastructure? Or do you think that the decentralized nature of web of trust, like to make the opposite example, say that I took X509 and made it like decentralized by removing the certificate chains, would do you think those two things, like as complete opposites, would be better than GPG? And which one would you think would be more feasible?
Debian doesn't like centralized in general. There's also arguments of why should we trust government papers. So in a way, switching to the key endorsements goes a bit more true to the feeling of several people. In many countries, you can get a perfectly valid passport with any name on it for a fee. So what's the point of trusting governments when you are international? So yeah, we are used to not trusting centralized. So in a way, yes, we are building some kind of parallel, time-limited, expiring, rotting kind of web of trusty thing with the key signatures. And we use GPG because we are tied to that technology. It could be something else, but I think it would be good if it were based on some cryptographically signed statements that people can publish about, like signed assertions that people can publish and that other people can collate and make sense in deciding whether to trust something or not. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, to me it does. To do full disclosure, I've worked with a reproducible builds community on some of the like the signed attestations for rebuilders, and I've also worked with some of the key management stuff with for Arch, especially after the DOS with the SKS key servers. Everybody's been like, what do we do now that I cannot even get a key from a trusted source? So I completely understand the gripe with GPG. But I agree with you that there's a challenge of realistically, how can you move all of this legacy infrastructure into something that matches new ways of thinking? And it's not simple because, for example, the only key that I actually hold to myself is my GPG key. I have maybe thousands by now SSH keys, and especially with Let's Encrypt, I have so many private keys for different websites that I don't really even think about it. But one that I can naturally think it's related to identity, it's my GPG key. And I agree it's a little silly because they're just a number. At some point, some sort of random number generator came up with some parameters, and that's exactly what I'm carrying around. The question I asked is because on the eToro project, what we ended up doing is we allow people to use GPG signatures. But we don't use the GPG trust model. That is, you can use your GPG key to sign whatever you want. You can sign any claims, and it's essentially like a PGP signature block, as RFC 4880 states. But if we want to check whether it's trusted or not, then we essentially follow our own trust infrastructure, which is it is a little bit more centralized, although I would even say federated to some extent, which is similar to the X509 ecosystem, but I think that's also starting to happen with all of the WKD reliance and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I thought you finished. Go on.
Yeah, I just felt like I wanted to add the last thing. In Arch, for example, we do use Web of Trust, but we have key signing keys, which are held by pretty much very trusted people. But it's a smaller team. It's not as big as Debian. And those are the ones that generally sign for people that are trusted to submit packages. So it's 4 keys, I think, 5 keys. And that's about it.
When I say Web of Trust, it's more of a social idea rather than the way GPG computes trust. I don't think many people bother about saying this person is trusted at level 2 to sign other keys and look at the number that comes out. I personally don't.
Yeah, I would have the 3 algorithms to compute that number, and it can give you different results depending on what you're using.
Yeah, I know. It's more like, so far it's been who's checked the paper of this person, effectively. And that's it. And we want a path, we don't want a trust level. Now we are switching to just who witnessed work with that key. And again, not doing any transitivity thing of any kind. And it's also quite specific to one application. So once you are a Debian developer, who cares? You don't need to have the key endorsed anymore. Until you need, once you are a Debian maintainer, you don't need the key endorsed. If you want to transition from maintainer to Debian developer, maybe it's good to have some endorsement. But then they will be easy because you have a record of uploads in the archive or something. We'll see the details as we go because it's all new for us, but I'm not sure there's anything that really looks into the GPG computation of trust values.
Yeah, I think I would honestly suggest not taking a look at it. I don't think it's a very good idea. It's a little messy, and I think what makes this problem very interesting is that it's a social problem that, like a knee-jerk reaction, we try to solve it technically, and then we find out that we really can't. Like an irony that I find is, for example, we say X509 centralized because then you need to trust the CA, and then governments can introduce their own CAs to manage the middle connections, and then we're like, but I want to check your passport that the government issued that before I sign your key. It's like, then how different is this thing really?
Yeah, indeed. And I'm quite happy that we made this switch. In a way, COVID-19 has been the excuse to clean this cargo cool thing up a bit. Because to me, it was ridiculous. Like, I had a hard time making a straight face when I asked people, I want you to have two path of connection to the web of trust, because only one path, you could be the sock puppet of another person. And I don't believe what I'm saying right now, but I have to say it because that's what we agreed we require, and that went on for way too long.
Yeah, I had that issue in particular was that I couldn't travel outside of the US because of visa issues, and I couldn't meet with people in person to have my key signed. Because most of the Arch people are like Europe and Germany in particular. So I was like, there is this little physical limitation that makes it complicated to get my key signed. But at the same time, it's like, how much value is it really adding? If people know me from like 5-10 years to contributing to the community, you know?
Yeah, precisely. That's pretty much the idea.
So I have a question for you. Sorry.
Go ahead, Renee. No,
Okay.
go ahead.
I'm your counterpart basically at the kernel.org side of things, and we do rely on the PGP's Web of Trust as opposed to coming up with our own scheme, primarily for the purposes that in the scheme that you described, it is impossible for a key revocation procedure to go through. If somebody, for example, says, this key is now stolen, there is no way for them to say to provide this information to everybody involved without just sending an email, please don't use this key anymore, right?
Not really. I mean, we are still using GPG, and we still fetch revocation certificates from the key servers, as long as the key servers keep existing, which is a question at the moment. So, I mean, the normal GPG revocation still works as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so you use key servers and you use this mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, key servers as a way to obtain keys and updated keys. Certainly, yeah, we keep using that. And I'm really afraid that they stop working. But in order to add a key to the Debian keyring, we look at key endorsement rather than key signatures, because they tell us something more close to what we want to know. Like, the key servers are still good for key distribution, let's say.
Okay. So how do you trust that somebody's key in the key server? So the person who would want to verify that somebody's a Debian developer, they would have to download their key from the key server and then manually go and check the signatures on a document somewhere?
You can get a Debian keyring, which has all the keys that are recognized as Debian developers.
Okay.
And you can use that to check if something has been signed by a Debian developer.
Okay. Who is the person in charge of creating the Debian keyring?
There's the Debian keyring maintainers. I can send you a link. They do the technical management of it. And Debian account managers ask about changes, like please add this key, please remove this key, please move this key to this other keyring. And keyring maintainers can still say, I won't add this key because it has obsolete crypto. They can They can do the technical maintenance of it. They can say, we have reason to believe this key is compromised. We remove it from the keyring. That doesn't make a person not a member anymore, but we'll need to go and find a new key for them, something like that. Sure. Yeah, so we have a team that manages that. I added the link to the...
Just as a miscellaneous question, I don't think this is like too interesting, but do you have plans of having like a WKD server to host the keyring in a way that's like easy to look up? And have you looked at Hagrid? In Arch, we're kind of excited about it because I think it's probably a little bit less prone to breakage than the regular GPG key server infrastructure.
I'm not familiar with WKD or key servers. I just looked up what a WKD server is, just to have an idea whether I knew it or not. I leave this to the Debian keyring people, actually.
Okay.
They are the one that are more into the technical aspects of it.
For the record, those are two aspects that will centralize your infrastructure. So that's, I believe, is the opposite to what Debian actually wants to achieve.
We need to have a centralized place to validate trust within Debian, but how you get in and out comes from a decentralized model. Does that make sense?
Well, it's kind of a conflicting statement because, you know, if you suddenly trust the infrastructure, for example, the Hagrid server, right? It is every key in the Hagrid server is considered to be trusted because it is just by nature, it strips all the third-party signatures. So if you downloaded a key from keyserver.debian.org, for example, then you are trusting that nothing bad has happened to that server. So you have a central point of trust and a central point of failure, right? So that's this. It doesn't matter how many times have verified the signatures before they put it into this key server, as long as that key server can be compromised by anybody. You know, this is a centralized bottleneck of all your trust.
Keyring Debian.org is not the authoritative thing. That's just key distribution.
Yes, I'm answering the other question, saying why don't you consider the following things like WKD and the Hagrid server?
Well, in WKD, we do distribute the certifications over the keys as well. So you should be able to follow the trust path on the WKD.
WKD strips third-party signatures by its nature. So WKD and Hagrid, they will remove third-party signatures. I've looked into it very recently because this is still an outstanding problem.
Still contentious, as in like there's people that don't want to strip third-party signatures. And my understanding is that the push came when the key packet DOS came to be. So the decision was in the short term to do that. In the long term, to still debate that.
I'm just saying how the software works. WKD software, when you send an updated key, it will remove all third-party signatures and use that updated key. I don't want to segue into technicalities of how PGP works. So I just wanted to point out that, you know, Hagrid and WKD are examples of a centralized distribution framework that may not be what distributed efforts like Debian and kernel.org, for example, would want to implement in the first place, which is why we haven't, for example.
Yeah, I know. Like, to me, there's distributed in the validation when a key gets put into the Debian keyring. I don't see. I mean, yeah, if somebody compromises the keyring Debian.org, not the key server, but the storage they have somehow, then yes. They can wreak havoc, and having some thing that publishes certificate saying this key is still the key of a Debian developer and this statement will expire in a week, and these things get distributed over some redundant federated something, empowering everyone to check this without relying on a central authority would be nice, but I think we have bigger holes to plug than that at the moment.
Mike, you had a question before, right? Did you get to ask it, or was it answered?
Yeah, it's almost rhetorical because I sort of know the answer, but I was just wondering, Enrico, how much thought you guys have given to threat modeling around this? Because I mean, the reason it's somewhat rhetorical is I think it's like fairly obvious that like this mechanism is going to protect certain sorts of attacks, but it's not anyone who's motivated and has means is going to be able to sort of get around this. Like, it's not going to stop a government. And
Yeah.
like how? Yeah.
I think threat modeling in this is very hard. And I can only work iteratively over a status quo. Also, having a consensus about threat modeling in a community like Debian is going to be next to impossible. You have the ultra paranoid that would like to find intergalactic governments with post-quantum computers. You have people that would like to just do their work with minimal fuss because creating packages is complicated enough. Thank you very much. You have the people that say, yeah, government can hold a gun to my head anyway, so why should I bother? You have the people who are Tails developers, who do consider governments as specific things to defend against. The community is a bit too chaotic to do serious threat modeling, I think. So it's more like common sense decision, hopefully with a round of discussion before to make sure one isn't stepping on too many people's feet, and then see where that leads you. But yeah, we have way too many developers and way too little ways of checking in with them, like to ask, are you still on board? Are you still in a work situation that allows you to keep your key safe? How do you do that? We have people who've been Debian developers for 30 years. I mean, working on those timeframes, working on those scales, working internationally. Yeah. Personally, I would like to see patch reviews of new uploads, like before thinking of governments. Who tells me that a Debian developer isn't just doing git pull from GitHub and upload into Debian, for example? To me, that is a more immediate threat than somebody social engineering a fake reputation to post lolcats into the bootloader 5 years from now, which will be removed right away and that account closed and starting an investigation. It would be really interesting to find out how to start an investigation, like properly. We're trying to figure out how to sue someone because Debian legally doesn't exist. Then we can talk about governments, but I think that the I'm fighting governments is the thing you start discussing where you don't have more immediate problems at hand. With this current kind of community.
Well, and I think
if you're .org, you may have different like if you give commit access to the kernel, you may have a completely different threat model, smaller community. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not being universal here. I'm thinking about Debian.
If I could ask a really specific question, you mentioned there are governments who you pay them off and they'll give you whatever name you want, just as a normal citizen. Can you name one or two of those countries? That's new information to me.
Mexico, about $60.
Okay.
No particular reason you're thinking of getting a passport in a different country right now? Or...
Well,
Remember, this is being
why just
recorded.
one? Why just one?
I am from Mexico, and I will say that it doesn't surprise me. Like there's a street behind downtown where you can pretty much get like a degree in a couple of hours with like $40.
Okay, but that's the kind of example of what I think that's a useful example of the kinds of challenges we're up against.
So,
I'll
yeah.
try to quote the source of that because I think I might remember exactly where I've read it.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between you can pay $60 and get a realistic-looking passport, as opposed to like you pay $60 and you're an official citizen of Mexico with records in the government databases, right?
Malta, $1,000. Cyprus, $1,000 or something like that, yes, for a Schengen passport. Maybe it was 100,000. Yeah, there was a scandal over there.
Let's have a Russian with a Mexican having a discussion, which more expensive, right?
Yeah. Maybe this is what you just answered. I had one other kind of question, which is, what, in your opinion, what's the scariest thing in the Debian space here? Is it people kind of just uploading the wrong stuff from GitHub, like you said, or is there something even scarier?
So the immediate scary shit, sorry. The immediate scary situation we are facing is having somebody seriously hostile and not being able to stop them. Because they're outside of Debian, we kick them out for harassment and they keep harassing. And it's gonna take us months to get organized to be able to reach out of Debian into the institutional world and say, stop. And this person is doing damage to Debian and other communities. And yeah, it was scary to see how hard it is to stop someone who's clearly doing criminal work from doing criminal work. And this is a disgruntled employee thing that has been kicked out before. They could do damage from the inside, and they're still able to do damage in a way that they burned people out with psychological consequences and having chilling effect on some discussions or something. So that's scary. Having controversial discussions on hot topics in a diverse community with all sorts of people has been scary. The scale is too big to when you face people angry because you took disciplinary action against somebody who was discriminating against LGBT people, and then you get the backlash of all the people that think that there should be free speech, there should be free hate speech. Then you can have a really nasty month. So So in a way that there's this social aspect where you feel that you can feel that the project is 30 years old and is growing. But when difficult things happen, it takes a lot more energy than needed. Like if somebody uploads malicious code, it's relatively painless. As soon as you notice it, take it off and warn people and everything. Social issues are more complicated.
Any other questions?
I had a comment. Of course, I'm biased, but you mentioned that something that you were interested in looking into was following like the chain of custody of how code makes it from upstreams into Debian infrastructure, into different teams, and eventually down to the user. And I think in Toto is a perfect tool to do that. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but yeah, just like as a general comment.
Yeah, it is possible, definitely. How to introduce it as a normal practice, I find it hard.
I am aware of that. I know that some Debian teams have a lot of buy-in, and they're more than happy to do it on their local, like a small niche group. But enforcing it within the bigger, broader community, that all of them have their like ad hoc practices or even like their own subculture, I think that's very hard. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, and Debian had a bit of a wake-up call with the whole SSH private key generation fiasco of a decade ago, whenever that was. And then
static analyzers, am I right?
the what?
The static analysis tool that eventually factored out the pseudo-random seed. That's what happened.
Yeah, indeed. And so from that point on, we started documenting much more clearly what patches we are applying and make it much easier to to see the code difference between what Debian is shipping and what upstream is shipping. We're trying to reduce those diffs as much as possible. But that covers the Debian side of changes. If you maintain Qt on your spare time, how do you go through the diff from upstream to see that nothing wrong creeped in while it was committed to GitHub or wherever you get it from, especially after you've browsed through there was the underhanded C code contest.
Oh yeah, the IOCCC.
No, not the obfuscated, the underhanded.
Yeah, underhanded. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually written a paper about countering underhanded code, so I'm very familiar with this problem.
Right. But yeah, it's a problem that's a bit bigger than Debian. It's a problem that everybody is going to have. We are mitigating it in Debian by having all downstream users of a stable release using the same version. So as soon as one spots something, it can get ported to everybody else, and it makes it more spottable because people will be especially careful about looking at versions shipped into stable releases of major distributions compared to there's a malicious or just a bug, unexploitable bug in only one commit on GitHub that made it to master at some point and was fixed the next day, but somebody pulled from that to build some Docker image that was put on production. How do you do that? So we're already adding value in that rather difficult point. But yeah.
So if I could, Yeah, I was gonna say, we've talked a whole lot. I mean, this is. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm trying to figure out how to summarize what you said in an hour in a few words, and I may have gotten it wrong. So let me throw this at you and see if at least it's an adequate, very short summary of a whole lot. Debian uses GPG as a tool to verify identity, but not really the GPG web of trust. Debian's really implemented your own kind of web of trust. But you do use a centralized GPG key server, really be notified about notifications, and you're built it all on GPG. It'd be too hard to change it at this point. Is that I mean, I've omitted a whole lot of things that we've talked about, but is what I just said accurate, or what did I miss?
It's reasonably accurate for some level of very high level, very short summary, let's say.
That's what that's what I was trying to do. I obviously summarizing an hour discussion into 2 sentences. I'm going to omit stuff, but what did I say anything that was wrong? I should say.
I think probably not, but it's very generic. It's really hard for it to be wrong. I think you miss that we are switching from legal identity to reputation-based identities.
Okay.
That we are challenging the idea that if a person does something wrong, you can go after them by knowing their legal identity. And I don't know, there's details about the endorsement, but that's already details. And that possibly sock puppets going through a reputation building process toward a large community are probably not at the top threat of a threat model in this kind of thing. All that I said are my best interpretation of thing. You put 2 Debian developers into a room, ask them a question, you get 3 answers. Obvious disclaimer here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
That was really useful. Yeah. Have a good day. David's going to go buy a passport right after.
So if I find the source of that information, do I send it to Kim or?
Sure. I can share it out. I'll follow up with you later. I'm just curious if you have like a wish list. I know you mentioned some things on here that you could use help with, and you don't know everyone in the room here, but there's things that we can help with. So I can follow up with you, and maybe we can link to that or something just to noodle on in the future.
Yeah, it would be good to stay in touch at least about the things we talk.
Yeah.
about.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.